Thank you for being here. Yeah, perhaps we should, but people will wander in here. There. So thank you for grabbing those doors. So welcome everyone to our Sunday Forum. Today's topic is Article 2 and the proposed changes to Article 2. So that's what we'll be discussing today. And if you don't know what Article 2 is and you're here anyway, don't worry, you'll find out. That's part of what we're going to talk about. But we will begin by lighting a chalice because we are Unitarian Universalists and we do love to light our chalices. And our words for our chalice lighting today are by Heather K. Januels. Our prophets died for the freedom of faith. We are here in their spirit. We are here to practice and sustain our living tradition, to light a chalice, claiming for justice the heat and power of fire. In our free faith, we are here, seeking freedom from despair, the freedom to be loved as ourselves, and the freedom to grow beyond imagination. We are here, gathered in the name of all that we find holy. Let us give thanks for the gift of gathering here.
Thank you, Sara. And thank you for being here and on site and online in the ways that you are here. So, what's Article 2 and why do we care about it? So I'm going to back up a little bit and I'll start by giving context. The Unitarian Universalist Association, the UUA, is a collection of covenanting congregations and associated organizations. So our UUA is not, a body that tells us what to do. It's not the Pope. It doesn't, have direction, although there's lots of support. But it's congregations that come together to create the UUA. So the UUA as an organization has bylaws because it's a legal organization, and the bylaws say how we are legally and, who's a member and how we vote and our governance and all those kinds of things. Article 2 is part of the UUA bylaws. And this is what the UUA says about Article 2. Article 2 of the Unitarian Universalist Association bylaws, principles and purposes, is the foundation for all the work of our UUA and its member congregations and covenanting communities. It is the covenant to which all of our congregations and covenanted communities pledge themselves when they become members of our UUA. So, Article 2 is the covenant, the spiritual pieces, within the legal document of our bylaws. Okay? So, which organizations are included? Well, lots of congregations. OUUC is a member congregation of the UUA, and it was August 6th of 1952 that the Unitarian Fellowship of Olympia, UFO, was recognized by the UUA as a member organization. So thus we have the 70th anniversary celebration this year. There are also covenanting communities and related organizations in addition to congregations. And so that's things like the UU Service Committee and the UU Women's Federation. And then there's a bunch of retreat centers and other organizations that are also members of the UUA, but mostly it's congregations and how we are together. So that's what Article 2 is. It's the covenant within our bylaws. It's what currently contains the 7 principles and the 6 sources of our faith. So it begins with, we, the member organizations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to promote and affirm, and goes into the principles and purposes. Okay?
And it's changed over time. It has a history. Article 2 has not always been the way it is today. In 1961, when the Unitarians and the Universalists consolidated, there was a lot of debate. As you can imagine, when there are 2 different denominations that had their own founding documents, their own statements of who they were, for them to combine those into one identity statement was a struggle. And the form and the structure of Article 2 really was built out of that it was a compromise between two different denominations. And as an example of some of what they struggled with, a lot of the debate was between the word our and the word thee. But it was an important place because it was the difference between our Judeo-Christian heritage and the Judeo-Christian heritage. And so one wanted our and the other wanted thee, and that's the sort of wordsmithing that went on to create Article 2. Then in 1984, there was the large change to Article 2 with the addition of the seventh principle, the interdependent web, and of the sixth source, earth-centered traditions. And those came in during a time where a big push was made to change the language of Article 2 to be less sexist. And that was led by women who pointed out that things like the dignity of man, which was previously in the previous version, was a little sexist to have in our Article 2. And in the process of making the language more gender inclusive, other changes also were lifted up, and one of those was that our faith tradition had really become more aware of our relationship with nature and earth and the environment, and so in comes the seventh principle and the sixth source. The bylaws call for Article 2 to be re-examined every 15 years. There haven't been any really big changes, though, since 1984. There were some small changes made 15 years ago or so in the early 2000s, but not large. And recognizing that we were overdue for another re-examination, in the last couple of years, the UUA board commissioned the Article 2 Study Commission to begin the process of a larger re-examination of Article 2. It's time. It's a living tradition, and we want to do this every 15 years. And that brings us to now.
So, because the Article 2 was due for revision, in 2020 at the General Assembly in June, the UUA board created the Article 2 Study Commission. And there is a charge to that commission, a written charge, and it's long because, you know, we're wordy people. You can find the whole thing online, but I thought I would read just the first couple sentences because it's pretty clear what direction the UUA board gave the study commission for Article 2. The Article 2 Study Commission is hereby charged to review Article 2 of the UUA bylaws and propose any revisions that will enable our UUA, our member congregations, and our covenanted communities to be a relevant and powerful source for spiritual and moral growth, healing, and justice. Proposed changes should articulate core UU theological values. The board believes that one core theological value shared widely among UUs is love. That's the first paragraph of the charge. And so then the charge goes on to say some really specific things. It talks about transformation. It talks about being an anti-racist, anti-oppressive, multicultural faith. It talks about moving into the future while honoring our past. And really is a direction, and I think was an invitation to the Article 2 Commission to explore widely what is the future of our faith and where are we now. And just notice that 2020, we had just gone into the pandemic, right? And the whole world changed. And the world has changed a lot over these last couple years. So not only are we questioning who are we now in the context of kind of this re-examination that we as a faith do, but we're re-examining who are we now in the context of the entire world shifting. So it's time to ask those questions. So the charge to the commission also asked them to explore widely and to invite in as many stakeholders as possible. And there's a whole list of stakeholders in the charge that the commission was asked to include. And so the commission has had a wide reach. They've done small groups, online and in person, in all kinds of forums, at General Assembly, at a regional assembly in all of the regions around the country. There have been invitations to participate in online groups from people all over the country with some specific questions, including recently in September, the commission had a draft of the proposed Article 2 and asked for feedback on that. So they've really been, I think, pretty inclusive. They've taken their time in really creating something that is as inclusive and considers as many perspectives as possible. Has anybody here participated in any of the Article 2 groups? I know I have, Sara has, yeah, a few people have. And so there's an opportunity to do that again, and we'll make sure that you know about that as well. So the charge to the commission is clear. Help us articulate what it means to be a Unitarian Universalist now. So the members of the commission represent a diversity of identities and geography for Unitarian Universalism. The commissioners now are the Reverend Cheryl Walker, Maya Waller and Satya Mamdani are youth members, Dr. Rob Spirko, and Dr. Paula Cole-Jones, who's been very involved in the Eighth Principle Project. And so then they have a lot of folks who are supporting them, administrative staff, an outreach team, those kinds of things. So the process that they used was just as their charge said. They asked a question for about 1.5 years. What are the core values of Unitarian Universalism? So there were lots of forums. One of them that I participated in, we were asked to look at a sheet that had probably 200 values on it and narrow it down to our top 3. Can you imagine? Yeah, it was hard. It was hard. And I recall that many were resistant. I can't just have just 3. No, we can't just have just 3. So to really focus on what are the core values, and then given those values, what is it that we covenant to do? How is it that we covenant to be in the world to live out those values? So that's the process that they've followed. So we're going to present, so about 10 days ago or so, the Article 2 Study Commission came out with a draft proposal of the Article 2. And we're going to share that in just a minute. They're getting feedback right now, so it's another opportunity to participate. And then their final proposal will go to the UUA board in January, and then it'll come to the General Assembly in June. So before we present what the draft looks like, are there any questions at this point about what this thing is and why we care about it? Mm-hmm. Let's have you speak into the mic so everybody can hear you.
It seems to me there was an attempt not too many years ago that you didn't mention, where new language was come up with for Article 2, and it went to General Assembly and failed. Okay. It seems to me that that's important, because it illustrates the difficulty of dealing with this article.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. The last time there were proposed changes, it was tweaks to some of the language here and there. It wasn't a wholesale rewrite, and it didn't pass at General Assembly. And because it requires votes of the delegates, and we'll talk about delegates in a minute, for that to pass. So yeah, just because it's proposed doesn't mean it's going to pass. Mm-hmm.
Thanks. What, if any, is the relationship between the Eighth Principle work and this?
Good question. So there have been several movements over the last years to modify the principles. The Eighth Principle movement, which is a racial justice focus. They've been a part of this process, and, you know, anti-racism, anti-oppression, multiculturalism was specifically part of the charge to this commission. There's also a first principle project, which wanted to change the language of the first principle from the inherent worth and dignity of all people to all beings. The vegans among us, if you will, were wanting to recognize that there's more life on Earth. And so certainly the commission took into account all of the things that have been proposed and that have been part of the revisions wanted and needed as part of their input. So any other questions? Is there anything online that we need to pay attention to for questions or concerns? Nope. Okay. So as soon as there's new batteries in the other microphone, we'll pull up some slides and we'll take a look at the proposed language of the new draft. I'm going to do a spoiler alert here. I'm going to tell you it doesn't have 7 principles or 8, and it doesn't have sources. It is a total rewrite of the Article 2. Yeah, it's vastly different than what we have now. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. So what the Article 2 Study Commission recommends is the first time you hear it, just take it in, right? So just breathe, and we have slides so you can see it, and we'll also read through what the language is. So Kate and Carbon, whenever you're ready, we'll pull up the slides.
Yeah. So we're going to read these slides, and yes, just let it sink in. Don't start to just let it sink in and think about how it makes you feel. Not in relation to the old, but how this one makes you feel. So Article 2, draft, our purposes and covenant. And next slide. The purposes. The Unitarian Universalist Association shall devote its resources to and exercise its organizational powers for religious, educational, and humanitarian purposes. Its primary purposes are to equip congregations for vital ministry, to support and train leaders, both lay and professional, to heal historic inequities, and to advance our Unitarian Universalist values in the world. We will transform the world by our liberating love.
Mm-hmm. So then the next section C2.2, Values and Covenant. Love is the enduring force that holds us together. As Unitarian Universalists and religious community, we covenant, congregation to congregation, and through our association, to support and assist each other in engaging our ministries. We draw from our heritages of freedom and reason, hope and courage, building on the foundation of love.
And next slide. Love inspires and powers the passion with which we embody our values. Inseparable from one another, these shared values are love in the center, and then interdependence, equity, generosity, justice, evolution, and pluralism.
So of all the values that they considered over these years, these are the 7 that were identified as the core values of Unitarian Universalism. So the first of justice. We work to be diverse, multicultural, beloved communities where all people thrive. We covenant to dismantle racism and all forms of oppression within individuals and our institutions. We are accountable to each other for this work. There's that word.
And then generosity. We cultivate a spirit of gratitude and hope. We covenant to freely share our faith, presence, and resources. Compassionate generosity connects us one to another in relationships of mutuality.
And then the value of evolution. We adapt to a changing world. We covenant to collectively transform and grow spiritually and ethically. Evolution is fundamental to life and to our Unitarian Universalist heritages, never complete and never perfect.
And pluralism. We celebrate that we are all sacred beings, diverse in culture, theology, and experience. We covenant to learn from one another and openly explore the depth and breadth of our many wisdoms. We embrace our differences and commonalities with love, curiosity, and respect.
And next, the value of equity. We declare that every person has the right to flourish with dignity and worthiness. We covenant to use our time, wisdom, attention, and money to build and sustain a fully inclusive and accessible community of communities.
And last but not least, the value of interdependence. We honor the sacred interdependent web of all existence. With humility, we understand our place in the web. We covenant to care for and respect the earth and all beings by fostering relationships of mutuality. We work to repair the bonds we have broken.
Then the next section is our inspirations. So that was 7 values. This is our inspirations. It was the sources before, I would say. As Unitarian Universalists, we draw upon and are inspired by the full depth and breadth of sacred understandings as experienced by humanity. Grateful for the religious lineages we inherit and the pluralism which enriches our faith, we are called to ever deepen and expand our wisdom.
And then the next section is an inclusion clause. Systems of power, privilege, and oppression have traditionally created barriers for persons and groups with particular identities, ages, abilities, and histories. We pledge to replace such barriers with ever-widening circles of solidarity and mutual respect. We strive to be an association of congregations that truly welcome all persons who share our values. We commit to structuring congregational and associational life in ways that empower and enhance everyone's participation.
And then the last section is freedom of belief. Nothing herein shall be deemed to infringe upon the individual freedom of belief which is inherent in the Unitarian Universalist heritages, or to conflict with any statement of purpose, covenant, or bond of union expressed by any congregation, unless such is used as a creedal test. In expressing our beliefs, we do so in the spirit of love, in ways that further beloved community.
So there we have it, the new draft. Before we go to discussion, just a little bit about what happens next. So the Article 2 Study Commission will be holding some feedback sessions on Zoom. Anyone can participate. The links to register for those were in this last week's announcements on Tuesday and in the Spark on Thursday, and they will be again this week as well. If you're interested, please sign up for one of those feedback sessions. There's also a survey. If you can't attend any of the sessions on Zoom, you can just submit your feedback on a form. And that link will be also in the announcements this week. Again, they want feedback from everyone, so don't be shy about it. They want to hear from us. Then, as we said before, they will take that feedback, do any other little tweaks that may be done to this draft, and bring it to the UUA board and to all of us again in January. So we should have a final draft that we can look at by February. Then that will go to General Assembly for a vote of the delegates. And there will be 2 votes, this year's General Assembly and the next year's General Assembly. But for the delegates to vote, we will be sending delegates. And so we will have here at OUC another meeting when we have the final draft in February, another one of these meetings, so we can all talk about how we feel about the final draft. And we will be taking applications of those who are interested in being the delegates to represent OUC. And once we have those delegates lined up, we will have another meeting so that the delegates can hear from you all in the congregation and really know how they are representing the congregation in their votes. So that will probably be an April or May meeting. General Assembly is in June.
So, this is not going to be without controversy, right? So, and there's a number of things that we can anticipate or have heard. There will be some grief about the 7 principles and the 6 sources going away. It's how I know Unitarian Universalism and have known it for more than 30 years. Sara has shared that the religious educators are saying almost every UU curriculum starts with the 7 principles. And so there's a lot of adaptation and change that will need to happen in order to figure out how we go forward. Not that that's an impossible barrier, and there is some grief related to, wait a second, I thought the 7 principles and 6 sources were who we were. There are some people over the years who have said that the 7 principles and 6 sources has become our creed, and we are a non-creedal faith, right? So maybe shaking it up a little bit, maybe it's time. The other thing that is controversial, not just with the proposed Article 2, but has been controversial for several years, starting with the Spokane General Assembly in 2019, is a focus on anti-racism. There are some in Unitarian Universalism who believe that that shouldn't be the focus, and who are upset about a number of things, including feeling that they are being called racist. I wrote a blog about this summer. The Gadfly papers came out of Spokane. Those have been circulating. There are a number of groups that have spun out of that. And I put together some educational materials about what the controversy is, how it's come to be. And you can find that on the OUC website. If you go there and just search on Gadfly, that blog will come up. I also put the link in the document to our tech team if they want to put it in the chat. And I'm happy to talk about that. If you hear anything, if you have any questions, if you want to talk further, you might have read the Gadfly papers and you want to talk about it. I don't recommend reading the Gadfly papers, but you might want to. And if you want to talk about that, I'm happy to have those conversations. And I know Sara is as well. So, it's a big shift, and folks who have been around Unitarian Universalism for a while, there's going to be some feelings about this proposed change. I'm confident that we can work through those. So the other thing I would say about delegates is OUUC gets 6 delegates to General Assembly, 6 congregational delegates. Sara, Darlene, me, Reverend Carol, we all are delegates too, and we get to vote because we're religious professionals, but there's 6 congregants who can vote. And we have not fulfilled our 6 delegates any of the years that I've been here. So this year and next year, I'd like us to send 6 delegates. And so if you're interested, please do reach out to us. So what else do we need to say? Anything? Okay. So we're curious about, where are you on this? How does this land? What questions do you have?
I'm Tim. I'm not a member. I have very little knowledge of Unitarian Universalism. I have had sporadic contact with congregations, but as far as, isn't this association a congregationally centered association?
Mm-hmm.
So if you adopt new covenants, languages, I mean, you were saying that people will be upset because there's no 7 principles and 6 sources, but does that necessarily mean that we must never speak about those things again?
Oh.
Because it's part of your tradition.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just as you might use something from the Torah or the New Testament or the Upanishads or the Bhagavad Gita or whatever you want to use in your worship and teaching, I don't quite see the conflict because you're rewording that. That doesn't mean that we forget about the past and we never mention it.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah, Timothy, that's a great observation. We get attached to our words, right? And so some folks are attached to the 7 principles. I see the 7 principles in the revision. The words are there, the concepts are there, the values are there. It's different words. And if you think that changing words isn't controversial, think about all the different interpretations of the Bible, right? And every time there's a new interpretation that comes out, someone reads the ancient text and interprets it differently or interprets it through a modern lens, there's a hubbub because, oh my goodness, they changed the Bible. So it's the same attachment that we have, for sure.
All right, we have a question in the room from Tim, and then we have one from online. So I'm going to do Tim first and then go to the online.
Thank you. I'm not sure, but I think I picked up an exclusionary statement in 2.4. I don't know if you can get back to it, but it's a line which ends those people who share our values are welcome, something like that.
Right.
We've struggled for years in people who don't share our values
Right.
in terms of their role with us.
Right.
Do you have any comment on that, or is that was I reading it right?
Sure, yeah. It says, we strive to be an association of congregations that truly welcome all persons who share our values. And so, one of the tensions, I would say, in our tradition has been, well, we welcome everybody, right? Except that there are people who don't share our values. And if you show up here and say you're not worthy, or this group of people are not worthy or welcome, that's not consistent with our values, and that's not behavior that we would allow here. So it's really trying to be more clear about what are the boundaries of our faith, because there are boundaries on our faith. It's big. We have a big tent, but the tent has walls and a ceiling and a floor. And that might be hard for some people too. That might be hard too. And we have struggled with people who have different values from us. So the work we do around how do we bridge differences and what is the bottom line? No, I can't, I can't abide by that. Because there are some of those for us too. And that's the tension with Gadfly, I think, honestly. It's complicated. It's complicated, yeah. Sara, would you add anything to that?
No, that was a great answer. Yeah.
Okay.
So to the question from online, is it in the chat or do we have? Yes, we're ready.
Okay, hi, it's Linda Seltzer here. I just have a couple of observations. I have to say, wow, my first reading of this and hearing of this, I think it's eloquent. And I think if you really read it and hear it again, you really hear the 7 principles and our value. They're there, but I think they're there in a way that I find much easier to relate to than the bullet points that were there before. I don't know why, but I think it's beautifully written. So here to all the work and the group that the people did to bring that together. The second comment I want to make is how much I appreciate the process that you and Sara are outlining to prepare our delegates to be able to know, understand the congregation's take on this. I served as a delegate to a congregation in years ago, and our congregation didn't even discuss what major bylaws changes that we were going to be voting on. And I just felt in the dark. So it was sort of like, okay, I guess I'm a representative delegate. It's not like I got voted on, I volunteered, but I had to vote my principles and in consultation with other delegates and members of our congregational delegates. So thank you. I don't recall our congregation or any other congregation I've been a part of going through that process. So I appreciate seeing it laid out. So I'm going to be real curious to see how the comments come from our congregation. My fingers are crossed that this puppy goes through. So that's it.
For that, Linda. Yeah, our congregation has not done a real process of preparing delegates or discussing things that were going to come up as a congregation previously. I would say that it's not just that we're going to have a better process this year, but it also is because the Article 2 Study Commission's process has been so inclusive and has done such a good job of providing us with lots of lead time. This is not coming as a surprise that we're going to have to decide how to vote as of June. We have enough time to really be thoughtful about this, and that's because they took a long process, and so we also can take our time to be thoughtful.
Mm-hmm. And if you think about it, it's in faith community that we really wrestle with the big questions of life, and who are we is a big question. And so that's not something you ever are done with, and it's not something that happens in a one-time conversation. Yep, Carbon, is there another person?
Another person online? In the chat, okay. No, so I see the first one there on the screen, that the anti-racism clause is important to me, being raised in Christian nationalism, which is racism hiding behind right to religion. Mm-hmm. I see UU as the antithesis to this, and our value statements should reflect this. And then Holly Porter has a question. Could you please talk a bit about the creedal test part of the freedom of belief section?
So as I read that, how I would interpret it is, if a congregation says you have to believe and ascribe to everything in this statement, that's a creedal test. It's telling people what their values are, what they have to believe. And if a congregation were to say, when you sign the membership book, you sign on to this Article 2, that would be a creedal test. That's how I would interpret it. I haven't seen anything about how the Article 2 folks are interpreting that, and that's a good question. You might just put that question in as feedback, Holly, and ask for some interpretation of that.
I'll do that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's always a little bit hairy. What's the difference between saying our shared values and having a creedal test, right? There's somewhere in there, there's a line that you cross. But I'm also, I think this is a thing that's worth exploring.
Yeah, I think for me,
and then we had another comment that was in the chat from Hawthorne. Could you bring that back up, tech team, so I could see the... Yeah, thank you so much. So speaking to the question about all persons who share our values, I would like to bring up the concept of the paradox of tolerance. It effectively states that in order for a society to remain tolerant, it cannot tolerate intolerance. All right. And John Gear had a legal guess in there about perhaps that creedal test a bit. Do we have any other questions, either online or in the room? Yes.
Not questions, but you asked for reactions to this, and I've read it several times over the last couple of days, and thanks for sending it out ahead of time. My reactions, word salad, extremely wordy. I like the bullet format. I mean, I can live with this, but really, do we really need all this verbiage? Secondly, it's striking that this whole structure is built on a very vague term, love. What in the heck is love? Many, many, many different things to many, many different people. If we're going to base the whole thing on love, we need a definition. What do we mean when we build this whole structure around this concept? And without that, what do we have? We don't have a lot. As far as the 7 principles versus this verbiage, I'm not terribly concerned with losing the 7 principles as long as the substance of them is captured. And I haven't gone through all this verbiage to see if they are all there, with one exception, and that's the 4th principle. A free and responsible search for truth and meaning. To me, that is the most important thing in the whole business. Because that is what differentiates us from all other religions. You know, this religion and that religion, they have the truth. And you sign on to that truth. Jesus or whatever. What this says to me is we are each responsible to search for truth always and everywhere. And I've seen that definition in writing somewhere. And that is not here. This talks about freedom of religion, which is an entirely different concept. Of course, everybody is free to choose their religion, but do we have a commitment to search for truth and meaning? Truth and meaning being what religion really is all about. And that's gone. And if that's gone, why would I want to be a part of this? Truthfully, why would I want to be a part of it? Because that, to me, this is the key of the 7 principles. And I know through earlier discussions in the congregation, different people focus on different paragraphs. But for me, and I think as differentiating us from other religions, that's the big one.
So I really hope you'll share your feedback with the commission, because this is the time to say something like, where's the 4th principle? And this is really important to me, and I think it's missing, so that they can take that into consideration, because they're not done yet. They're not done yet. So, yeah, thank you. And thank you for your thoughtful engagement with it. This is what we're asking for and what the commission is asking for.
Are there any others? Anyone in the room or anyone online? Yes.
I so welcome the rewrite because it opens the whole discussion to the concept of love. I have family, biracial family members. I have biracial friends. And if I say, shall I accept the Korean part of them or shall I accept the Swede part of them? It's a total conflict. This new document takes away those discriminations so that you can look at a person as a whole person through that concept of love and acceptance.
And, I would just say, so what is love? What is this thing, love? that's the topic of pretty much every sermon that every minister writes in some way or another, right? It's one of those big questions that we wrestle with. And every faith tradition has something like that that they wrestle with. So what does the life of Jesus mean in how we live our lives, right? That's a big question that Christian traditions wrestle with. So to me, that's a fundamental question that we would engage in our faith community.
Another.
That discussion about love, most of us love our animals, but we don't question ourselves about why we love the animals. We don't question, do we love them because of their color, their shape, their denominations? We love them because of this organic sense of compassion or acceptance or feelings, and how I would love for somebody to absolutely define love through that organic human experience.
All right, thank you. So we have just a couple more minutes. Any last comments, questions, either online or in person? I don't want to leave anybody off. Not seeing any online. Okay.
Okay.
Oh, we have one. Okay.
Yeah. Can you hear me? Sorry. Okay. Overall, the overall themes I really like. The one thing that jumped out at me was in the initial purpose. I've never felt in a Unitarian congregation that we are committed to one very specific thing and we shall do this. And the opening, when it says our primary purpose is to heal historical equities and advance values in the world, it just feels, especially when we say that one, this is what we do, period. That's it. That's our only goal. Feels a little evangelical to me. And I gravitate to the Unitarian Church because we're not evangelical and we are not driven to just one specific, very specific current topic. And this is what we shall do. All of our resources shall go there. And second, that is very externally focused. That worries me, because I come to the church to work on big things in the world and make a difference. And I don't have a problem with this, wanting to make this difference in historical inequities. That's my job. I do it professionally and in my own life. But there's very little here about working on myself to be a better human being and working with others to create better things. And this feels very externally focused. So it's rather narrowing in that it takes this one thing and that thou shalt do this. And I'm not very big, as a Unitarian, I'm not very good with thou shalt. But it also doesn't leave me a lot of space to feel about self-growth and growing as an organization ourselves and learning and evolving. Those are covered well in other areas, but it feels limiting. Is probably the best way to say it. I don't mind wanting to work on that. I think it's a good thing to work on. It just feels a little narrowing. So thank you for the opportunity.
So in response to that, it is important for us to remember that what that paragraph is talking about is the purpose of the UUA. So it is saying that the UUA shall do these things. The congregation, OUC, still has its own mission statement. And while we are a member congregation of the UUA and would therefore be supporting the purpose of the UUA, this really isn't binding upon each of us individually that this is all that we shall do. This is, and it's actually legally required in nonprofit bylaws to have a statement of what is the purpose of this organization, of this existence as a nonprofit. So this is giving that for the entity of the UUA. Okay. Well, we are out of time for today, but not out of time for this extended conversation and exploration. So please do send in your feedback directly to the study commission by either attending one of their Zoom sessions or by just putting your comments into their online form. And we will make sure that all of those links are well publicized this week as well. And then watch for more from us, probably in February or January, when the final draft is out. And if you want to chat offline, if you have more thoughts or this is just churning things for you, I'm totally happy also to just chat about what all of this means.
So we'll extinguish our chalice, because that's also what we do. These words are from Melissa Jetter, growing out of our comfort. We extinguish this chalice today, but we are illuminated by a faith that allows us to sit and think. In this quiet time, we can reflect in solitude, meditating on love and growing out of our comfort. Though we experience discomfort, we are excited to give birth to a new, just world. Thank you all for your interest and engagement. More to come.